KV0YDN, Kilo Bravo 0 Yankee Delta November. Eric, Pinewood Lake, no traffic.
Good evening, Eric. Anyone else want to check in? Please call.
Call again, KF0RYT, Kilo Foxtrot 0, Romeo Yankee Papa. This is Dave, checking in.
I got you. Thanks so much. Anyone else?
This is KF0GQI, Kilo Foxtrot, Golf, Quebec, India, Doc and Pierce.
Evening, Doc. Anyone else?
This is N0EMP, Greg in Fort Collins, with Debbie, K0DB.
I got you, Greg and Debbie. Anyone else?
This is K5SGC, Kilo 5 Sierra Golf Charlie, Dave in Fort Collins, no traffic.
Good evening, Dave. Anyone else?
This is KF0ODD, Paul in Berthoud.
Good evening, Paul. Anyone else?
This is WB5TEX, Whiskey Bravo 5, Tango Echo X-Ray, Dale, Loveland, no traffic.
I got you, Dale. Thanks so much. But whoever doubled with Dale, come back.
W1VAN, Ivan, Fort Collins.
Good evening, Ivan. Thanks for checking in. Anyone else?
This is N0NYY, November 0, November Yankee, Bart in Evans with N0QXQ, November 0, Quebec X-Ray, Quebec, Gene. Good evening.
Good evening, Bart. Thank you much. And good evening, Gene. Anyone else?
This is K0AZA, Kilo 0 Alpha Zulu Alpha, Ron, Fort Collins.
Ron, anyone else want to check in? Please call.
KESF, Alpha Echo 0, Charlie Foxtrot, Ben, Fort Collins.
Always a privilege, Ben. Thank you. Anyone else?
This is Kilo Echo 0, Mike Echo, Dick, Loveland.
Good evening, Dick. Got you. Anyone else? Okay, it looks like we got a little break in the action. Thanks so much for checking in with the holiday week and all. I wasn't sure anybody was going to be here, but I'm sure glad you guys are. Anybody got any questions or anything else? Please call. Okay, well, I guess I do have a topic. I get this asked every now and again, and I actually ran into it myself. What do you do about outside interference if you can't control what the other guy is doing? Anybody got any ideas? Mark?
Well, I have played around in the past with other people, usually, with things like taking AM radios and looking for noise sources from power lines. My church in Pennsylvania was right next to a ham's house, and he was known in the neighborhood as somewhat of a... They assumed he was madman, but he wasn't. He was just a fanatical ham, and he'd take his little AM radio, put it up to his ear, and walk around the neighborhood and write down pole numbers, and then he would go back and call the electric company and tell them which poles had noisy fittings or fuses on them, and they would usually come out and fix them. But all the neighbors thought he was kind of strange. We put in a new LED system at the church, and it was creating some noise, and he came over and told us that, and we found out that the noise was extremely low level. He was only able to hear it because he was right across the street from the church. But we put some filters on and made the LED noise go away, and he was all happy with us after that. But, let me grab a nickel. That works good with broadband interference, but when it gets down to stuff on specific things on specific frequencies, it gets a little more adventuresome, especially on HF. I haven't done a lot of HF DF work. I've done a lot of UHF and VHF, and that's a lot of fun, aka fox hunting. But I haven't done much of that on HF as of yet. Talked about it, read about it, studied about it, have a little bit of hardware to play with, but just haven't gone down that road yet. And I should, because I have continuous S9 on most bands around my house. And there are noise canceling devices that pick up the noise, reverse the phase, and add it back in to allow you to get a lower noise level on your HF channel, HF bands. I have it here. Willis, WA5VRL, was well versed in those devices and told me how to do it, and I just haven't Haven't actually got the job done yet, but I really need to because HF is pretty miserable at my house. And zero in my life.
I think there was somebody else in there with you, Bart. Come back.
This is ODD. I was just going to throw some humor in there, and that was either say develop your own EMP or move.
Greg, you've had some experience with that. In fact, you've had some experience with me with that. Any comments?
Yeah. If it's a amateur band, you track the source of the noise down. As Bart has mentioned, we've gone out and tracked down some things that were commercial devices that developed a spur or were off frequency. And so far, knock on wood, we've been able to talk with people and get equipment fixed or turned off that's putting RF out on an amateur band. So far, I haven't had a situation where we couldn't resolve that ourselves, but the next step would be the FCC. And currently there's a volunteer monitoring program, and if you work through them, they'll try and resolve it. This is an ARRL program, and if they can't resolve it, they have a direct pipeline into the FCC. That gets the complaint moved to the top of the pile in zero EMP.
Yeah, but what do you, I mean, if the person doesn't know what's going on and he's not apt to say, yeah, it's me, if you turn him in, then, I mean, it's really not his fault because he's not really aware of what's going on. What's your legal standing?
Well, you're right, and that's why in our cases we have, like the thing that was down in, what's that town down south, Louisville, Erie. No, it was in Erie, the Erie radio signal. Things like that, they did not know. And once we initially contacted them, they didn't believe they could be the source of it. But when we actually showed them, then they went, oh, okay, and turned it off. In that case, it was a sprinkler controller, a commercial-grade wireless sprinkler controller that was on a large farm property that the city had bought from an estate, and they didn't know that this piece of equipment was sitting there plugged in and powered up. So yeah, I'm not saying go right to the FCC first. You try to track it down on your own and educate them. And the volunteer monitor program with ARRL will do the same thing. They try to educate and gain compliance voluntarily. And then if they don't, which again I haven't had that issue yet, but if somebody says tough beans, I won't even, I can't go there. Tough beans, I don't care. Then at that point, they know about it. You show them, you explain things to them. They don't care. They don't want to fix it. Then it's time for the FCC to get involved.
Again, I have to ask, even if they know they're doing something wrong, but they don't want to fix it, are they liable to fix it? I mean, legally liable to fix it?
Well, there are systems that are not intended to radiate, and if they put some noise out in the amateur bands, for instance, every Christmas, now that we have cheap Chinese LED Christmas lights, when the Christmas lights go up in the neighborhood, I can tell. And I just wait. It's not worth it. And eventually the Christmas lights get put away, and the problem is solved. It's not a huge impact for me. Something that is designed to radiate and is an FCC licensed piece of equipment, like a wireless sprinkler system controller, of which we've had two problems with so far. One of them was for interfering with this repeater. That was the one at the HP campus in Loveland. something that is licensed and it is designed to radiate, if it develops a spur or it drifts off its assigned frequency into the amateur band and it's a intentional radiator that's on the wrong frequency, yeah, they're liable. They're not allowed to do that. And once they're aware of it, they have to fix it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if it's off of that, yeah, I mean, and I have got a sprinkler controller right here, and it does say FCC on it. I'm not doing that. Anybody else have any comments about this?
ODD question?
Go right ahead there, Mr. Paul.
I have a question. I was wondering, is that rules or let's say come up with a scenario where it's a governmental, be it a local municipality all the way up to a federal government. What if it's their equipment that's actually trapping or crossing over into the ham band?
Well, let me see if I have this.
Go ahead.
A local, county, or state government would not have any special magic authority to violate federal law. Some of our bands, the federal government has joint use of. I think they could operate anywhere in the 70 centimeter band if they want to, and I think they have some long-range missile detection radar on the East Coast and the West Coast. As a matter of fact, that's on the 70 centimeter band, and near the feds and tough cookies, they can do what they want. However, if it's a piece of equipment that's malfunctioning, they will want to fix it. They don't want their equipment to be malfunctioning. There was a system we found last summer that was down 420 some megahertz down in the single sideband portion of the band. And it was a federal system, and it had developed a spur. They were supposed to be down 404 or something like that, below 420. And they still were on their intended frequency, but they had a spur that was really big on above 420. And we found it and contacted them, and they fixed it within 48 hours because they don't want their equipment to be malfunctioning.
YDN?
Go ahead, Eric.
KB0YDN. Yeah, well, first off, even the feds have to comply to Part 15, which is the noise section of the FCC regs. Unless, of course, you're right, they write themselves a waiver, and in which case they can do it. Also, 70 centimeter is, yes, set aside. Primary user is military search radar. So, West Coast, East Coast, there's a zone along the entire Canadian border that you can't use 70 centimeters in with 100% free reign. You can find a little detail of that on any paper copy of the repeater handbook. And also, driving past White Sands missile range, there are warnings basically telling hams to stay off 70 centimeters. So, KB0YDN back to that.
Yeah, I've worked with the feds down at Federal Center when I was working for Colorado Safety, and I've done a lot of different classes and stuff down there. And those guys really, they follow the rules. They don't just say, well, I'll wait till tomorrow to do this. Because I don't know if they're proud. Maybe they are. But I do know this, that if there's anything that's wrong, they want to fix it right away. And that's why I used to go down there and do all kinds of forklift stuff and all kinds of man-lift things and certify them. Even though they're a government entity, they honored my ticket. So I've never had any trouble with federal government at all with anything like that. I haven't worked much with the local, but from what Greg says, it seems like they want to fix it too.
Yeah, but most devices should comply with Part 15 as an unintentional radiator. There are limits that are supposed to be set. There are also limits in Part 15 that say somebody that picks up noise outside of their operating conditions should be able to operate through those conditions. And that one gets a little fuzzy as to how it's enforced. Interestingly enough, cars are not subject to Part 15. They're explicitly written out.
Is that right? Even with all of the electronics and computers that can upgrade on the fly, they're not subject at all?
As I understand it, that is correct. And this didn't start in like 1980 or something like that, when electronics became more and more involved with engine management. But more earlier than that, when you had to deal with distributors and ignition coils and all the nasty stuff they threw away around as the capacitor wasn't working right.
You mean stuff you could fix and not just look at and say, what is this?
Oh, come on, Joe. You can do part replacement and component replacement on bad boards. And often these, when they fail, leave a visible trace.
I imagine there's a few guys, and Bart's being one of them, saying, yeah, I know that deal. yeah. I've got 3 cars, and I tell you what, I can change the oil.
Anyway, that was my 2 cents, so back to you, KB0YDN.
Very good. On this case at BYU, I haven't said that for a while. But any other comments or questions about this?
AZA with a question.
Go right ahead, Ron.
So, speaking of HF specifically, I've done some reading that some types of HF antennas are less susceptible to noise than other types. I know horizontally polarized tend to pick up less noise than vertically polarized, but within HF horizontally polarized, does anyone have any experience with one antenna type being less noise sensitive than others?
I don't know who that was. There's 2 of you in there. Go ahead.
NYY.
Go ahead, Bart.
So I have experimented with a delta loop, and because it is a closed loop, it has a very low natural resistance, like pretty much a dead short, well, whatever the 60 or 70 feet of wire is. The resistance is extremely low. They tend to be very quiet. The same is true of a folded dipole, because it also has a resistance of close to 0. The impedance is much higher, but both of those antennas tend to be a lot less noisy than an open dipole or a vertical than 0NYY.
0HI?
Didn't get the call, but go ahead.
Yeah, this is 0HI. I've been experimenting with mag loop antennas because of a lot of the noise in my neighborhood, and though they're a real pain to try and tune, I have had some degree of success with the ability to null out certain noise sources with it. The one that I thought worked with the Alex loop, but one that I kind of, you might say, inherited is what's called a box fan antenna from MFJ. Really tight to tune, but I've had some really interesting luck with getting rid of noise that way. But it is somewhat band limited.
Well, Ron, I'll give you my 2 cents. I've got a vertical and a horizontal here. The hex beam being the horizontal, and you can't steal that antenna from me. I bought that antenna. I've got a hex beam and then a 680, which is their hex beam's probably 25 feet, maybe 30, and of course the 680 is up a little bit farther, it's probably 35 feet. So not a lot of noise, but noise in the 680, and normally, and I'm saying normally, I mean, you got a bunch of lightning and stuff, it's going to make noise. The hex beam is the best. But, again, the hex beam only goes to 20, and I want to go down a little bit to 40 or 80. But it's absolutely right. If it's horizontal, it should be less noise than the vertical, in my opinion.
Let me see if I have this. Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, I have an HOA, so the hex beam is out of the question. Right now, I'm driving my gutters, and they work pretty well, but I do have a huge noise floor. And interestingly, it's almost as bad at 3 in the morning as it is at 3 in the afternoon, but other than turning off power to my house to confirm that I'm not generating it, I haven't spent a lot more time digging into it. I know that Bart and I talked about a dipole, and so I can throw a dipole in the backyard and not attract attention. So that may be the next step. It will probably work better than the gutters anyway, and we'll see if it's a little less noise prone. K0AZA, back to that.
Thanks for that question, Ron. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
AD0HI, two things. One is my solar panels, that system makes a lot of noise, and right now I am fighting an issue with ground fault interrupter where if I crank up the power on HF too high, it trips the breaker, not because of power, but because of RF.
Somebody had that same problem. Greg, do you remember what that was? It was the controller and not the solar panels?
Yeah, it's the charge controllers, MPPT, usually charge controllers on the panels, and they put out some RF, and you can filter them. My solar system up at Rattlesnake Ranch, because it is so RF quiet up there, any kind of noise at all was had a big impact on what could be done with receiving up there. And we tried several different charge controllers. Can't remember the name of the one we found that was the quietest. They're a light blue color. WW8L had recommended them to me. They're big in the RV community for the same reason. Can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. But if it's a full-blown home installation with, rooftop solar and a great big grid tie system, those can put out some RF, but the people that install the system usually have a filter kit they can put in that'll help.
YDN.
Better.
Two thoughts on that. Well, I have a particular brand of solar controller, and it has a switch to decide how wide the pulse widths, or how frequent the pulse widths actually occur. And one setting will generate RF noise, the other setting will not, and it was specifically put there to help people who had noise. But this was a component cutting problem, because the exact same controller I had from 15 years ago doesn't have the issue at all. So I imagine they had filtering electronics in there, and they took them out for price counting. So that's my thought on the matter. KB0YDN.
AZA.
Go ahead, Ron.
I think one of the charge controllers that's getting a lot of love now is Victron, Victor Ida, Charlie Tron. That may be the one that Greg's thinking about. I think they're blue. The other one that just seems to be a good quality controller is Renogy. They always get good press.
Yeah, it was Victron. The Victrons were really quiet. And there was somebody in the Boulder area that was a ham radio operator that was making his own charge controllers, and he promulgated that those were really RF quiet, that he designed them to be RF quiet as a ham radio operator. He was trying to sell those to the ham community. We got one and tried it out, and we immediately sent it back to him. It was pretty horrible.
I guess that didn't work. Pretty horrible. Interesting. Any other comments, questions?
I'll just say AD0HI again. Any ideas on my ground fault interrupters that are being tripped by RF? I tried joking them, and I'm about ready to replace them and hopefully find a breaker that isn't subject to the being tripped by RF.
And why? I dealt with that at Brian's house. KD08EXV, Brian Johnson. Anyway, and he had the same exact problem. It's not a problem so much as it is the nature of GFIs. They are looking for voltages on the ground wire because if anything goes wrong anywhere in the circuit, the GFI is supposed to open the circuit. It decides wrong by a voltage being present on the ground wire that's higher than 0 by some amount. I don't know what that amount is. But you have unshielded wires running all through your house. And when you put RF on them, it induces a voltage in those wires, including the grounds, and the GFIs detect that, and they trip. According to, I didn't talk to the electrician that finally ended up coming to his house to help him with it. And last I knew, Brian was in the hospital. I don't know that he's gone home yet. But they got a solution to that. But understand that that's what GFI is supposed to do. And at one point in time, home contractors and electricians were going nuts with GFI circuits. They're putting them everywhere. And that isn't really necessary. But if you know what your GFIs are, typically they're the kitchen and the bathroom. And if they go back to a breaker on the panel, let them trip and leave them trip until you're done talking. Technically, they are doing what they are supposed to do, and getting all of the RF off of all of your cabling in your house is a pretty tall order. And 0 in my life.
EMP.
Greg?
So as a newer class of breakers, that's even a bigger problem. The GFIs, like Bart said, are just looking for current on a ground lead, and if they detect it, they think there's a fault, and they trip. There's a new class that are arc detectors, and anyone that's heard noise from an electric fence that is sparking knows that arcing or sparking creates RF. And the arc fault detectors specifically look for RF, HF, low frequency or HF RF energy. And if they detect it on the line, they think, oh, there's an arc happening somewhere. And this is totally different from the ground fault. They think something is arcing, and they shut off or they trip. And those are a real big problem with HF stations. I don't have any of those breakers in my house. I don't know if they're legally required or if they could be replaced with standard outlets legally. I don't know what code is on that, but that's an issue that's come up. And 0 EMP.
Gecko.
Go.
Roger. Well, unfortunately, I have a new enough house that virtually everything in my house is ground fault, arc fault breakers. A lot of them are combination. And the worst ones you can have are Eaton breakers. Let me have this drop. When the Eaton arc fault originally came out, it was tripping on everything. CB radios, you name it. And I believe the ERRL went back to the FCC and complained enough that the FCC made Eaton redesign the breakers. And I actually talked to them when I bought the house. They said, oh, no, yours are new enough that you have the ham-modified breakers, so whatever it's worth. Although, trust me, I can trip just about any breaker in the house if I turn up the power enough.
That's interesting. I've got 3 GFIs, of course the house was built in the 80s, and I run power, and that's one problem I haven't had. Any other comments, questions?
80HI again.
Ed, HI?
Yeah, when I had my basement finished, the way the code was explained to me is that if it's wet areas like kitchens, bathrooms, you were required to have a ground fault circuit interrupter, and if it was a bedroom, you had to have an arc fault interrupter, and then they have these combined function breakers, which are GFIs and arc fault, and depending upon what they consider in how the design of the breaker determines an arc is occurring is problematic, and that the ground fault interrupters, the way they detect how they detect the problem is they use most of them use like a toroid in there with the principle that goes in, it goes out. That the current that goes through the breaker out on the hot lead has to come back on the neutral, and if it doesn't, if there's an imbalance, then that's considered leakage that went some other path that it shouldn't have, and that it trips on that basis, and that the RF just interferes with it. Its operation, or certain breakers do, and I tried the clamp on ferrites and all of that stuff, and I'm wondering if it's breaker dependent. And I've got these GE breakers that I'm thinking about switching them out because it happens to be the circuit that is not is a ground fault interrupter circuit that my shack is on. The way that it's wired, it's they consider that area to need a ground fault interrupter, and that's the one that's tripping. So and it is power dependent. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just switch out the breaker with some other brand and see if that makes a change.
This is KZTYU, net control for this evening's TechNet. I might have, do you know who Palomar Engineering is?
Yes, I do. I bought some Tords from them. I think some 31s.
And you've talked to them. I mean, they're geniuses on this type of thing. I thought they might be able to give you some sort of an idea.
That is a great suggestion. I have not, I've ordered from them, but I have not talked to them with my plies, and I've heard that they are experts, so that's a great idea. I think I'll give them a call tomorrow and see if they have any advice or maybe experience with particular breakers or other ideas of something I can do. I've tried what I can on the station side, but as has been pointed out, you've got all these unshielded wires all over the place in various daisy chains, and they all feed back to the breaker panel and can induce all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah, they're really, really good. I've been dealing with them quite a bit here, although I'll tell everybody later how we got it fixed. But I have a Heil equalizer that I've had for probably a year and never been able to use it. And this is an HF type equalizer. And when I told him that, I says, I got a lot of back feeding. He says, I told Bob Heil that he was going to have trouble with that. And I had to laugh because I thought, he says, you better buy this kit. So I did, and boy, it really works. I had to kind of modify it slightly, but not much. So I would recommend them highly.
Thank you. I will give them a call in the morning.
We spent an hour, I think, on the phone, and he didn't charge me for it. Of course, I had to buy some stuff for him, but, that's what it was. Any other comments or questions?
Mike Echo.
Go ahead, Dick.
Just anecdotally, I've talked to some different people, and like I say, this is just not scientific, but anecdotally. If you can go with square D breakers, go with them. In my case, unfortunately, I've had two small problems. Number one, all my antennas are in the attic, so they're really close to wiring. And secondly, I cannot change out the breakers in my existing panel with anything else unless I change out the entire panel, which kind of cost prohibitive.
And why?
Go ahead, Mark.
I'm guessing you have a Siemens panel. I hate those things. But Siemens or GE, either one, you have the same problem. The other thing you could do, also probably cost prohibitive, is remember good old-fashioned metal conduit? That would provide shielding for those power wires, and that might partially or mostly alleviate the problem. The problem is you spend all that money to find out, well, it only fixed half of it, or didn't fix enough of it to make a good difference. But the GFI thing got really carried away with that. They're great for keeping you safe if you drop your hair dryer in the wet bathtub, or your razor in the wet bathtub, or for outdoor outlets, they make sense. For everything else, I think it's kind of silly. I mean, okay, there's a risk that one of your kitchen outlets could end up getting an appliance thrown in the sink with a bunch of water, and then I guess you should have one in the kitchen too. But originally it was just bathrooms, and then it was bathrooms and outdoors, and then it was bathrooms and outdoors and kitchen, and now it's like everywhere they can possibly put them in, it seems like they do, and it just, oh well, how do you fix it now? And zero in my life.
I understand kitchen because you've got a sink there. Understand bathroom, it's obvious. Outside, I can understand. Why would you have one in a bedroom? I mean, I don't sit too much in the bedroom, so why would you have one in the bedroom?
80HI, the requirement that, as the building inspector explained to me, was you didn't require in the bedroom a ground fault circuit interrupter, but it did require an arc fault circuit interrupter, because the rationale was if a cord got frayed or something, it could cause, because it was run over by a chair or whatever, that it would cause sparking, which would then cause a fire. But it was the bedroom was the arc fault interrupter, not the ground fault interrupter.
And electric blankets were a culprit there as well, and zero in my way.
Oh my God. And we now are saved. I'm glad.
Do HF.
Hey, there, you had a double there.
You're safe, you just can't do any HF. And you got real lucky, Joe. That's good that you're not having any issues with it. I have several GFIs in the house, and I'm only ever running 100 watts. I have not had any trouble with it. I do tend to turn the touch lights on and off randomly, and there's a couple of those in the bedroom. And that's the only issue I see from the HF at this point. And zero in my life.
Well, as I've talked about last week, and I'll kind of mention it this week for the new people that are on there, I did have a problem with the amp. And I'm running an Ameritron I've got to write this out, 811 HD. And what it's got four 532 tubes, which are heavy duty. They're replacements for 811s. And I'm running it on 110 volts. It'll put out about 800. I don't put out 800. I usually run around 5. I'll let this drop for a minute. Well, I feel like I was building a race car, or I was racing a race car. Because anybody who knows a race car, on Sunday you unloaded it from Saturday, and then on Monday you started working up until Friday, possibly Saturday morning, to get ready for the show. And then Sunday you unloaded it, and that's what I was doing with these radios. I thought, my gosh, this is like racing a car. What it was doing was, I turned the amp on, and HRD would just drop. Wouldn't drop the computer, but it would drop out completely. And Ham Radio Deluxe, for people who don't know what that is. And I had tried everything. James and I worked on this thing for weeks. I tried everything. I've got more ferrites on this thing than anybody ever owned, I think. And then last Saturday, I'll let this stop for a second. At the club meeting, James walked in, and I gave him his Ballon because it didn't do any good. And he says, "Here, I forgot to give you this." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's a jump drive." I said, "What the heck's good with a jump drive? How's this going to work?" He said, no, he says it's an isolator. He says he only knows that one people make it, and that's DigiRig, and if you're familiar with those guys, they're out of Grand Junction. I plugged it in, and it went away. I have no idea how it works. I don't care. But it's so easy. It just jump drive. You just put it in, and then on the other end, you put the wire in, and that's it. And it works great, and everything is fine now. So you can isolate these things. We tried to find out where it was coming from. Every wire has got at least one ferrite on, if not 4 or 5. And I got clothes on the outside and clothes on the inside. I couldn't figure it out, but that cured it. Now, the one thing it didn't do is didn't lower my noise floor at all, but all the other stuff did lower it. So I guess I'm okay. So anybody else got any questions or comments? I'll shut up now.
K0ME.
Go ahead, Dick.
Okay, I'll try to condense this. 2 things. Number 1, my son just had his house totally rewired to add solar, all free, of course, and I noticed that there are not individual ground fault or arc fault breakers, but there's one big unit in the breaker box that's some kind of an arrestor, because all the rest of the breakers in the entire house are just regular, small, no arc fault, no ground fault type breakers. And number 2, speaking of noise level, I bought the higher cost Palomar filter that I put on the output of the 7300, and that did drop my ambient noise by a couple of S units, so it took it from S9 to S7.
That's super. Anybody else have any comments?
So, RYZ.
I didn't catch the call, but go ahead.
KF0 RYZ, not to take it back to the arc arrestor, but for a bedroom, I would say it's needed for paper clips. If you know, you know. As a kid, we recommend that more than once.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess, yeah, you bet. Well, super. I guess that's something. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Well, this has been a very good discussion, and I do appreciate everybody getting in on it because, believe it or not, people have a lot of trouble with noise, one way or another. And it could be internally, it could be externally. And it was nice that we talked about this. The net lasted about 50 minutes, and we had about 15, 16, I think, people. Thank everybody for joining us. We'll be back again next Monday at 6 o'clock. I don't know who's on, but I know they'll be very, 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 very good. So if nothing else, is KZOT clear, and the repeaters open for general use. Everybody have a great, great week.
This is KF0ODD. Happy New Year's.
This presentation was brought to you by the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club. For more information, visit our website, ncarc.net. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.